story of day number 70 on Bill and Sue's Excellent Adventure. Ballpark number 76 is the story of transition. It begins in the Raleigh suburb of Zebulon, North Carolina. This is Five County Stadium in Zebulon, North Carolina, which is the home of the AA Carolina Mudcats of the Southern League, affiliated with the Pittsburgh Pirates, but as is plainly obvious, this is a home not yet finished. And the Mudcats are not here yet. In fact, the only folks around are contractors working on the ballpark. And so the skies up there are threatening. I'm not sure we'll see baseball at all tonight. However, we will definitely not see it at this field. Wilson lies some 20 miles to the east of here, and that is the temporary home for the Carolina Mudcats for now. Their field of dreams being only a half-realized dream at this point. Fleming Stadium, which is still the home of the Coastal Plain League's Wilson Tobbs, short for tobacconists, was built in 1939, and for several seasons in the 1950s and 60s was the home stadium for an earlier version of the Tobbs in the Carolina League. It has not hosted professional baseball, though, since 1973, when the Wilson Pennants played there for one last year before finding their way up to Hampton, Virginia, and eventually becoming the Peninsula Pilots. The old ballpark was very clearly a temporary home. In fact, it would be just home of the Mudcats for 3 more weeks after we saw it, and since our mission was to find that which was different, the difference between this park and a current stadium pretty quickly became part of our narrative that evening. It was kind of a convoluted path, but we made it to Fleming Stadium in Wilson, North Carolina, which is the temporary home of the Mudcats. And for now, anyway, the rain has held off, and the Mudcats and the Charlotte Knights have consummated their contest in there tonight.
Ballpark 76 brings us to Fleming Stadium, the temporary home of the Carolina Mudcats. You could tell this is only a temporary home. One thing, there's no fence signs out there, which is really odd for the minor league, considering fence signs bring in a good supply of money for them. I wouldn't say a lot, but it helps. And of course, I don't think a permanent stadium would have several rows of seats looking like this. Rather interesting. So it's probably a last-minute decision to play here. And here we see the scoreboard at Fleming Stadium. This is another sign that it's a temporary park.
But there was nothing wrong with Fleming Stadium. To find it lacking because it didn't have the amenities of the other parks in the region is to find fault with a bicycle for not being a BMW. They're both worthy modes of transportation, designed for different things. It was also at Fleming Stadium that we had our first visit that season with Max Patkin. If the late Max Patkin were a baseball park, he might be one of the classic old parks in the Carolina League. Not nearly as flashy as his more modern colleagues, but eminently more approachable and classy in an unpretentious way. Known as the Clown Prince of Baseball, Max Patkin had been barnstorming around the minor leagues for decades after ending a short minor league baseball career of his own. Critics called his act corny, and we saw it a few times, and I had met him in Macon a few years before. I think Max, who passed away in 1999, fit the era in which he worked perfectly.
38, catcher, Keith Olsen.
end, even between innings of ball games, we wanted baseball to be the focus, not something that would take our attention away from baseball, Ninja Turtles riding go-karts on the stadium scoreboard, for instance, but would rather complement the game we were already watching. Max's act had gotten a renewed boost in popularity since he had played himself in Bull Durham. We didn't talk much about the game itself on the tape that night. The Mudcats got a 3-run homer in the bottom of the 8th inning from outfielder Tom Green to break a tied game and went on to win 7-5. Green's pro career would last just 2 more years and top out with 8 games at Buffalo in AAA in 1993. Green was the best hitter on the team when we saw them in June, but by the season's end, that mantle had been taken up by Kevin Young and Keith Osick, both who would go on to lengthy careers in Pittsburgh. The Mudcats also had a converted position player who was trying to reinvent himself as a pitcher with a quirky pitch, the knuckleball. Tim Wakefield was 5-6 with an ERA in the mid-3s when we saw the Mudcats in mid-June, but he ended 15-8 that year with a 2.9 ERA and was the best pitcher on that team. He would win 8 games in Pittsburgh the very next year and 192 more, mostly with the Boston Red Sox, before his 19-year Major League career ended. Chronologically, this was our last stop in the AA Southern League in 1991, but on the low mileage tour, we'll return to stops in Birmingham, Memphis, Huntsville, and Chattanooga in September of this year. The real story of our night in Zebulon, then Wilson, then after we left Zebulon again, was a fish story. Yes, there are catfish in North Carolina. A web search yields lots of places where people that fish for multiple varieties of those bottom feeders can find them. But the Carolina Mudcats name was actually born 500 miles to the south in Columbus, Georgia, where, as you will see tomorrow, the Chattahoochee River runs quietly and swiftly just beyond the edges of Golden Park. It was there that in 1988, the Columbus Astros became the Columbus Mudcats. But the team needed more than a new name to catch fire. The 1989 and 90 versions of the Mudcats actually drew less well than the Astros had in Columbus. But by 1992, the first full season at 5 County Stadium in Zebulon, the team drew 328,000 fans, 3 times what they were drawing in even their best seasons in Columbus. But increased attendance was only part of this fish story. The team also netted almost $500,000 in merchandise sales in 1992, more than double what it had been in Columbus and light years ahead of the Columbus Astros. We had been captivated by this wild new brand taking minor league baseball by storm.
Well, from what they say, 5 County Stadium over in Zebulon is going to be real nice, but we had a good time tonight at Fleming Park in Wilson, North Carolina. It's an interesting ballpark, very deep center field, 440 feet out there. And they've got one of the biggest foul territories, definitely a pitcher's park, although you wouldn't tell it by the final score, which is out there on the antiquated scoreboard. They haven't had a team here since 1973, and that was a co-op team. They haven't had an organized team here since the 60s, and in fact Rod Carew earlier than that played his last minor league game right here at Fleming Stadium. So we didn't get to see the new ballpark in action for the Carolina Mudcats, but we did get to see a nice park and a good game. Carolina won at 7-5. And we're off to our next stop. The Carolina Mudcats gave us a couple samples of the hottest cap in baseball. This is the Carolina Mudcats hat, which you've got to love. I mean, that logo is just terrific. And so there's one of our hats. That's Sue's hat. I asked her if I could borrow it, and it's posing here on the Voyager. And I wanted to take this opportunity actually to add a footnote to the stuff that we saw in Zebulon, because we filmed that before we went to the game last night. And now we found out that they are planning on opening July 3rd, which may or not be before this episode of the tape airs, but that Field of Dreams that they've got over there is a dream that they say, according to the owner of the team, Steve Bryant, will be quickly realized. So, in fact, they wanted to make arrangements for us to try to make it back down here to Zebulon for their opening of the season, their opening of their home season at 5 County Stadium, but unfortunately we couldn't make it. But the Field of Dreams Stadium in Zebulon is a dream that I guess will soon be realized. July 3rd. Their opening day, and they're going to be bringing in a person, I guess, who owns the farm that Field of Dreams was filmed at, and he will be bringing in and shipping dirt, bringing dirt with him and throwing some of the dirt from that farm onto the Field of Dreams in Zebulon, North Carolina. So that's an interesting story, and this is certainly our favorite logo in minor league baseball. And now the tape's over. This, by the way, is a shot of the apartment complex where we stayed with some friends here in Raleigh, North Carolina.